All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with Mr. Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
Alan, I'm doing good. Hope you and your family had a nice holiday weekend.
It was good. It really was. It was hot, but it was good. As always, a day off goes by a lot faster than a day at work. So
Yes.
that's the tough part. That's the tough part. Speaking of holidays, or sort of, um, Jim Moore, 90th birthday was yesterday, or was it Sunday? I don't remember which day it was. I think it was Sunday. Um, and
Yeah, I
he
think
was
you're
out
right.
there. Yeah, he was out there doing leg presses. Looks damn good for 90 years old. He still does commentary on Channel 6 in New Orleans during the season. So, I mean, what can you say about this guy? I mean, I remember Hank Stram at the end of near the end of his life, he had a walker when he got in the Hall of
Hmm.
Fame. Um, Bum Phillips was not in great shape, when he got old. Tom Fears, Dick Nolan both had Alzheimer's.
Right.
Um, I do not know what happened to John North or J.D. Roberts. Um, but, a lot of coaches really look bad towards the end. Jim Moore does not. He looks like he could live for another 20 years, honestly. Um, Still a sharp mind, still sharp
Hmm.
wit. Just a really impressive person. It really, really is. I saw you put a column out the other day
Hmm.
talking about Jim Moore bringing in the Saints' first golden era or golden age. And I got playing in the background back there that heavenly season, the
Mm.
1987
87.
Saints, first winning season, first playoff appearance, second year Jim Moore, just how magical that year was for 9-game winning streak.
Hmm.
That was a streak that was never surpassed until 20, 2009 when they won 13 games. They never won more than 9 games in a row. So it's just really an amazing time. Just because we didn't know, you had no clue. And I think this is interesting when we're leading into this new regime, this new era. You really had no idea that this team had this potential to not only win, um, have a winning season, but to get into the playoffs. I know where I was in 1987. Where were you in 1987?
Not a ninth, 10th grade of high school.
Okay.
Watching football from home, obviously, most of the time. So you didn't up in Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania, because I lived close to Erie at the time. You didn't see a lot of New Orleans Saints games. But that year, I was for my first NFL game, live NFL game, was the New Orleans Saints at the Pittsburgh Steelers that year,
Mm.
when the Saints won in Three Rivers and clinched their first ever winning season. Which I obviously, and you guys can attest to this more down there. It was just like winning the Super Bowl. For you guys. That's why you and I kind of poke fun at the younger generations. I think we could talk about that in plural
Mm-hmm.
now. That got spoiled. By Drew Brees mainly. Drew Brees and Sean Payton. Basically, you're either a Super Bowl contender or bust. Well, I mean, 1987 was again, the first time, the 20th year of existence for the Saints was their first winning season, first playoff berth, and it's one. I always liked the New Orleans Saints a lot growing up. Because they were just a fun team to watch. When I was little, I was watching Archie Manning, Wes Chandler, Galbraith, Muncie, etc. And for a little guy, I was about my son's age at the time. Offensive football was fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Mora and the crew, the Dome Patrol, and the rest of them, really took the league by storm. I was older then, as I mentioned, in my teenage years. So I knew more about the game. I was playing. So I understood, respected defense. And to this day, I love, and I know you do too. I love watching old 1980s, 1990s NFL games, but the Dome Patrol is still my favorite to watch because they were just a fast, ferocious defense. And that was, and we'll talk about the underrated offense in a second, but that was what Jim Mora brought to the Saints, was a toughness, a belief, and we're just going to take you behind the woodshed and beat the hell out of you until only one of us emerged from behind the woodshed.
Yeah. It's funny you said you were in 10th grade in 1987. I was in 10th grade in 1983. And that was the year that the Saints came closest to having a winning season, going to the playoffs, and that team was a defensive team. They played a lot of close games, and Jim Moore kind of kept that going. And this time in 1987, I was in college. I was in my second year of college, the fall of 87. So I got to, because I was in Lafayette, I got to see all the games. But the interesting thing about this is, the Saints weren't selling out. So you had the blackout rule in New Orleans. So it really took a little while before fans bought into, okay, this is a good team. This is a different team. This is a special team. And it took even longer because you had 3 games where there was a strike. You lost a game. It was the Falcons game, which was week 3. Weeks 4, 5, and 6 were, if I remember right, Cardinals, Rams at home, and Bears on the road. The Bears game is famous, and it's on YouTube still, because that's Sean Payton out there at quarterback, number 17. He is a backup quarterback for the strike team Bears. So you'd been playing, if the strike didn't happen, you're playing basically what's left of the 46 defense team, because Buddy Ryan had moved on in 86. So you're still dealing with, in the end of Walter Payton's career there. But you're still dealing with a great Bears team. They were playing the defending Super Bowl champions, the Giants, that year. Lawrence Taylor gets hurt, and Lawrence Taylor only plays, I think, 1 or 2 series, and he has to go to the bench. Phil Simms is hurt. So you're playing, I think Rutledge was the backup quarterback then. So it was a lot of lucky breaks in that year, but they were still a good team. So I think by the time the Giants game came around, fans started going to the game regularly, and they were selling out. So people were seeing this team at home. So by the end of the season, it was huge. Everybody was really, really into it. It just, there's a couple things. Yeah, I agree with you, Hemisphere. If they had a better quarterback, they probably win a Super Bowl. If they had some speed on offense in the receiving core, they probably win a Super Bowl. If they had a consistent running game, they probably win a Super Bowl, because Dalton Hilliard's best year, we didn't have a quarterback. We had 2. We were playing Fourcade and Steve Walsh. Fourcade and Bobby Hebert. Steve Walsh was the following year, and Dalton Hilliard got hurt. You just were always missing that one thing that hurt the Saints. But that 87 team is why I started watching the draft in 88, because now I'm interested, because now the draft's a big deal. We had a great draft in 86. I want to see who we're going to draft now in 88. We won't talk about the 87 draft.
No.
If you really want to get mad, that's probably one of the biggest busts in franchise history. Bigger than Jonathan Sullivan, bigger than certainly Marcus Davenport. Sean Knight is probably one of the worst draft picks in Saints history, and I'm going back counting the Meekum years. He is still one of the worst, because these guys should have known better. Yeah. you're not drafting. You're not having morons draft like before under Meekum. You actually had Jim Finks, who's in the Hall of Fame as an executive, and he made that mistake, and he even admitted it. He admitted it that year. That was a damn mistake to drafting. And they traded him midway through the '88 season for a Denver Bronco bust named Ted Gregory. They just swapped busts, and Gregory actually made a play in the 42-0 beatdown of the Broncos in '88. But yeah, it's the thing about Jim Moore was, and at the time, it's what fans were craving. Jim Moore was a coach who talked like the fans. He just was flat out honest. That's why all his sound bites are still on the internet nearly 40 years after they happened. Woulda, coulda, shoulda speech. That stunk. We sucked. He just told you that. It wasn't like we're on. Like Bill Belichick. We're on to Cincinnati. It wasn't that kind of comment. He just let it out, and I think fans really, really enjoyed that brutal honesty. It's just, and playoffs, of course. He admits, it'll be on his tombstone. Playoffs. But yeah, and I think the Saints not winning it all, the Saints not being well prepared for free agency. When free agency happened in '92, and that team getting picked apart and getting the pieces that were replacing it were substandard or lesser players than what they had before. I think that's
feels familiar, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that really undermined Moore's abilities or Moore's popularity in 1980, 1993, 94, 95, because, they could see Sam Mills being successful in Carolina. You could see players, they were running the columns, X Saint of the Week, and you could see those players still doing well on other teams. Yep. But in New Orleans, the players, they got to replace them. Morton Anderson gets replaced by Chip Lowmiller. That's unacceptable. Ricky Jackson having to go to San Francisco to win the Super Bowl.
That was the killer. That was the killer for Saints fans right there.
Absolutely. The NFC West was a tough division because the Rams were a good team. The 49ers, of course, we know what they were doing. Atlanta, when Jerry Glanville got there, and the too legit to quit and all that other bullshit, that made it tough. So you were playing a great division, and at the same time, you were killing the AFC.
Yeah, and you look at just there's the 49er dynasty. The Rams, Jim Everett, in his prime. Jim talks about his Rams teams the same way we talk about those Saints teams, that if it weren't for the damn 49ers, we'd have been fighting for a Super Bowl every year. And even, you look outside the division, you already mentioned the Bears were a perennial Super Bowl contender. The Giants were a perennial Super Bowl contender, 1-2. The Redskins, a perennial, not playoff contender, guys, Super Bowl. These teams were at the top of the league year in and year out. And then, you turn the page into the early 90s, the Giants had gotten old, but then you have the Cowboys. So, just the juggernaut that you had to face to get out of your own conference. And Bill Walsh himself, coach of the 49ers, said multiple times that the toughest opponent on their schedule, it wasn't the Bears, Giants, Redskins, it was the New Orleans Saints. And, he admitted that the years that his team got by the Saints, which were more often than not, unfortunately, the years that his team was able to get by the Saints and physically match up with them were the years he felt like his team would make a legitimate push for the title.
Yeah, you mentioned the Redskins. Well, what were the Redskins Super Bowl years? The Doug Williams one was 87. That's the Saints year. The first year they got to the playoffs. The next Super Bowl the Redskins win, 1991. That's the year the Saints won the division for the first time in franchise history. So even when the Saints were seemingly at their best, you had this eventual Super Bowl champion sitting in your conference. I used to say all the time, especially in 88, you put the Saints in the AFC, the Saints are going to the Super Bowl at least once, if not twice. Mm-hmm. Buffalo didn't scare me. Miami didn't scare me. And I know Buffalo went to 4 straight Super Bowls in the 90s. But Buffalo, Miami, the Patriots weren't anything back then.
Denver.
Even the Raiders to an extent. The Bengals, who went to 2 Super Bowls in the 80s. The Houston Oilers and their House of Pain.
Mm-hmm. The Browns and Kosar.
The Browns and Coach Schottenheimer. Yeah, Bernie Kosar. But the Saints could beat the Browns because they played the kind of game the Saints like to play. Mm-hmm. And it was weird. There's a lot of reasons why I didn't like the 49ers.
A long list, yeah.
Yeah, I've learned to respect Joe Montana, but I still hate the 49ers. I really, really do. I wanted them to lose every Super Bowl they were in.
Yes.
Just because they pissed me off, But yeah, so Jim Moore had a huge fight. That's why I don't blame him per se for all the playoff losses. I blame Bobby Hebert more than I blame Jim Moore, because I thought the 1990 team was probably one of his best defensive teams. Mm-hmm. And if you would have had Bobby Hebert playing in the 1990 game against the Bears, they probably win that game. I still say the Saints were not offsides in that block punt, block field goal. I don't care what the official said. Even John Madden, when he drew the line, he's like, I guess, the helmet must be over the line. That's a lot of crap. But anyway, and that's not Roger Goodell, because Paul Tagliabue was commissioner back then. And no, Bobby was not a good quarterback. But he was the best of what we had. Yep. There's a theory I have about Bobby, by the way, and why Jim Finks treated the quarterback position the way he did. Jim Finks, I think, felt that you could win games with defense, special teams, a sound running game, but did not put an emphasis on having a star quarterback. Mm-hmm. He wanted a quarterback who was capable of leading the team, but did not win the game for you. Mm-hmm. Drew Brees won the game for you. Joe Montana won the game for the 49ers. But Finks came up out of the 70s. You look at the teams he built. The Vikings go to the Super Bowl with Joe Kapp. That's Jim Finks. The Bears go to the playoffs with Avellini. Bob Avellini is their quarterback, even though they got Walter Payton, because he felt like that team was built around Walter Payton, not the quarterback. And so I think he felt that way about Hebert and Walsh and Fourcade and all those quarterbacks they had in there, that you didn't need a stud quarterback to win the games for you. And I think that was part of why the Saints never won.
Well, and you look at the Super Bowl some of the Super Bowl teams from that era. Jim McMahon, Phil Simms, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon. Yeah. Would you call any of them? Yeah, they were good quarterbacks. And none of them were great. None of them were even close to Hall of Fame caliber. So, it was tough to disagree with Fink's logic, and Jim Moore's too. I mean, Jim Moore won 2 titles in the USFL and went to a third with Chuck Fusina, as quarterback. So, I mean, we could talk about Fink's philosophy, but Moore was right on board with it too. And the drafting, the drafting reflected that.
Absolutely.
You can't overlook the fact that the Saints had a chance to get Boomer Esiason and just let that go right by the wayside too.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember that you're 1990. You're just you have a defense that's capable of winning the division. Bobby Hebert sitting out. You got the opportunity to trade him to the Raiders. And this is a rumor, but I kind of believe this. But you have this ability to trade him to the Raiders and get Marcus Allen and probably a high draft pick for Hebert. If that's Mickey Loomis, he's making that phone call. He's pulling the trigger. Mm-hmm. But for Finks, it was a principle thing. He wanted to break Bobby Hebert. He wanted to teach him that he was not a star quarterback, that he was going to get paid like all the rest of them, like just a cog in the machine. You mentioned the Redskins. Joe Gibbs won with 3 different quarterbacks. He won a Super Bowl with Theismann, won a Super Bowl with Williams, won a Super Bowl with Rippon. And Finks saw that. Well, yeah, Finks basically saw that happen. And he's like, yeah, you don't need this guy. The Giants won 2 Super Bowls, one with Phil Simms, the other with Hostetler. You're thinking to yourself, these guys are interchangeable. It doesn't really matter because you've got a defense that can win games. You make great plays with your special teams. You've got, most importantly, a running game. And I think that's where the Saints really fell short. You had a good running back with Ruben Mays for 2 years. Then the injuries started coming into play. Dalton Hilliard comes in and takes over 88, 89. Hilliard has his best year as a player in 89 with 18 touchdowns. 1990, he gets a knee injury, blows out his knee. The injuries start coming into play there. 88, he brings in Craig Hayward. Craig Hayward can't control his weight. He really wanted Brad Muster anyway. You've got Barry Word had a cocaine problem, couldn't kick that habit. Finally did, goes to the Chiefs and revitalizes his career. But you draft Von Dunbar. Von Dunbar can't play when he is healthy. So it's just a constant struggle to find that running back, that Eric Dickerson. That's what he wanted. That guy you could feed the ball to him 300 times and run the football and control the clock and win the game with that. The Saints just didn't have that. And I think that's the biggest reason why Moore never won a playoff game with the Saints. When you have the lead, when you want to control the clock and run the football, the Saints just couldn't do it. The Giants did it. The Bears could do it. The Redskins could do it, with the Hogs. That's the difference between them. Even the Cowboys in 1990, 91, 92, when they started going to the Super Bowls, Emmitt Smith could run the football. That was what was missing from the Saints. So more so than Hebert, I think not having that stud running back really, really hurt them because they got glimpses, but no consistency out of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, and I know people like to point to more as conservatism. The conservative play calling of Carl Smith. And and Hebert. Those are the 3 most popular blamed to point fingers at, but the philosophy was the philosophy, and that was Fink's philosophy. That was Moore's philosophy. They won with that in the Moore did in the USFL. But like you said, the difference was you had that big mammoth offensive line with the Giants and Joe Morris. First Joe Morris, then O.J. Anderson, closers. With the Redskins, you had the Hogs, and you could put you and I could be 1,000-yard rushers behind them.
Hey, Timmy Smith did it.
Yeah, right. In one game. Walter Payton with Chicago. Hell, even Roger Craig and Wendell Tyler. With the 49ers. The Saints didn't have that. I love Reuben Mays. Love Dalton Hilliard even more.
Mhm.
But when the injuries started to mount, and that was we talk about how painful it was to watch Ricky Jackson get a ring with San Francisco. It was just as painful to watch George Rodgers get a ring in '87 with Washington. Because Timmy Smith had the big Super Bowl, but Rodgers was their leading rusher that year, and he finally got his life sort of turned around. And the Saints, Bum Phillips, gave Rodgers away for a couple reasons. Number one, he wanted Earl Campbell, but number two, Rodgers was basically snorting his way out of the league at that point. But obviously he was still a very capable back. You put George Rodgers in that Saints backfield in '87, '88, '89, then you might be talking a different story.
Well, it's funny because when Jim Moore comes in '86, what is the first thing he does? He drafts three running backs. Four running backs. Four. He drafted four, actually, if you count Barry Word.
You're right.
He drafted Dalton Hilliard in the second round. Highest pick spent on an LSU player in Saints history. I always thought it was Devery Henderson. Henderson went 50th. Dalton went 32nd. And it was only 26 teams back then. But Dalton Hilliard, Reuben Mays, Gil Finnerty, who went to Italy and came back to the Saints, and Barry Word, four running backs, because he looked at that roster.
Plus, he brought Buford Jordan over from the USFL.
Yep. He looked at that roster and said, look, I got an aging Earl Campbell who's done. I've got Wayne Wilson, who's been with this team since 1979. I don't think he's going to last much longer. He didn't. They traded him to the Vikings for Mike Jones, and he retired that year. But, I got a couple other holdouts, leftovers from Bum Phillips era. I don't have a running back, so I need running backs. So he started drafting running backs, and it's just first round draft pick in '88. We got to get a big running back because Keith Millard made our life hell. He destroyed Brad Edelman, so we got to get a running back who can run between the tackles. Gets Craig Hayward. Craig Hayward, unfortunately, cannot keep the weight down, cannot stay healthy. But and then he takes 3 years later, they draft, or 4 years later, they draft Vaughn Dunbar. It just... You were so close, To me, if you had Marcus Allen in '92, you probably win that game versus the Eagles. You probably advance. I don't know if you go to the Super Bowl, but I think you advance at least as far as the Kansas City Chiefs did with Marcus Allen. That's to me. I blame Carl Smith because no one called on 3rd and 7, a 5-yard pass route as consistently as Carl Smith would call.
Yeah.
That's what killed me. Yeah, Mario Bates,
Mario Bates, Derek Brown.
Yeah. Mario Bates, the problem we had with Mario Bates was he just could not, he didn't like taking hits, especially when his teammate punched him. But, I mean, he just didn't, he would run out of bounds rather than drop a shoulder and run somebody over. And the painful thing about Mario Bates is Mario Bates came like 16 or 20 yards away from breaking 1,000. And the Saints believed in him and did not pick Eddie George in '96. And I think that really doomed Jim Moore, because I remember that draft fest in '96. And the fans chanting for Eddie George as Eddie George is sliding down the board. And they take Alex Molden instead. And the air in that room just totally evaporated. I mean, there was nobody excited. I mean, that room cleared out so fast. And that was the beginning of the end. They already got rid of, Quinn Early. Wally, Wesley Walls. I was Wally Williams. I was going there. Wesley Walls. Jim Everett's like, you get rid of all my guys, and it just that was the final straw. It was just such an unpopular draft move, and because of that, people were ready for Jim Moore to go by '96, and it's a shame because he tried to rebuild the team and he couldn't do it. Sean Payton did, but he couldn't. Sean Payton had that 2017 draft class. That's the kind of class that Jim Moore just never got. So yeah, Mario Bates, after that, he played one more year with the Saints in '97, and I think he was gone by '98. And I think he went to Arizona, but you'd have to really sit there and try and find if he did anything ever again. Because he was pretty much out of the league by then. Golly, we spent almost a half hour talking about Jim Moore. I was only going to spend about 10 minutes on him, but you just get into that. Honestly, there's not a whole lot to talk about right now because it's OTAs. So this is what you do in the summertime. You start reminiscing about how the Saints used to be. But on to OTAs because we're at a point right now where people just don't know what to make of this team. All the national media is just dumping on them. They're the worst team in the NFL. They're not going to win a game. And I don't agree with this at all because you won 5 games when you fired your coach, when you were injured to hell. I just think that, especially because I'm still seeing the Steelers winning 9 and 10 games. And it's like, really? With what? They got one receiver. They don't have a quarterback. Your defense basically is TJ Watt. Where do you think they're getting this? I know he's always had a winning season, but if the team looks like they're trying to tank for Arch, who's not coming out this year, but if a team is going to be tanking and they're going to show you they're tanking, that seems to be the Steelers right now because they do like the worst team. I can't see them beating anybody in that division.
Maybe Cleveland. Because they're Cleveland, but
because they're Cleveland. Yeah, but I mean, they're not going to beat the Bengals. They're not beating the Ravens. The Ravens are on a different planet compared to the Steelers. So I just, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, Hemisphere. I'm going there right now, but for them to rip into the Saints as the worst team, it goes back to what I keep saying: the agenda. The Saints didn't take Shedeur Sanders. So you didn't rebuild with the right quarterback. You took some guy that, I don't know why you think he's so good. He's 7 years. He's 26 years old or whatever. He's just not that good. You should have taken Shedeur Sanders. So now we're going to make sure you're the worst team. And you won't trade Alvin Kamara. Some kind of fantasy thing some Washington writer wrote. They could trade Cam Jordan for 4th and 6th round pick. Why? Cam Jordan is at the end of his career. He doesn't have that much left in the tank. I mean, you're just picking names out because you're like, hey, that's somebody we know. And that's the other thing. They look at the Saints roster and go, I don't know who these people are. So they must not be any good.
Right. And that's why they invent these trade rumors that, Alvin Kamara is going to get traded because we want Alvin Kamara to be traded. Chris Olave is going to be traded because we want Chris Olave to be traded, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just not, like you said, it's not going to happen. I've tweeted about it, wrote about it, several times. The Saints are in a rebuild, whether they want to use that word or not. That's what this is. But they're also not waving the white flag on winning this year. You don't bring in a first-time coach just to tank. They're not going to do that. They may not be the most talented team in the world. You glance at this roster and it's hard to come away with, yeah, I'm positive that they're a playoff team. I don't feel that way either, but I also don't feel like that they're a bottom 5 roster. I'm not. It'd be stretching for me to say they're a bottom 10 roster in the league. This team still has a lot of talent in different places. The problem is, and we've talked about it week after week, the problem is lack of depth in key places. Yep. And something we just talked about, the plague that cursed the end of Moore's tenure, as this team, Sean Payton's old team, Dennis Allen's team, as this team got older, they didn't draft well enough to replace those spots. So that's why that they're staring into the mini abyss that they are now. But they're not tanking, and they're not going to be having a fire sale for these players. They're not.
Yeah. I mean, why would they anyway? What are you going to get for them? I mean, a 4th and a 6th really for Cam Jordan. I mean, if you were tanking, maybe, but it's not worth it. It really is, because the cap hit you're going to take by trading them. And that's the other part of this. The cap hits that you take by trading guys. Why would you do that to yourself? Because Carr retired, because Ramczyk retired, you are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. You're going to get your cap room now. Taysom Hill is at the end of his contract. This is his last year. It's a lot of money. Yes, you're paying him, but it's his last year. You're going to be over the hill on these things. You are now looking at years where you're going to have lots of cap space. So it doesn't make sense to have the fire sale, because all you're doing is handicapping yourself this year for no savings. And that's the honest thing. So one of the things that was a problem last year was offensive line. We drafted another tackle, of course, Kelvin Banks. He is now, they had him last week at left tackle. They moved Fuaga to right tackle, and they put Trevor Penning at guard. Do you think that is going to be the starting lineup come week 1?
I think that that's what they hope the starting lineup is for week 1. Because Kelvin Banks played left tackle throughout college. Talise Fuaga, who I thought played very well at left tackle last year, but he was a right tackle throughout college. Trevor Penning obviously was a colossal failure at left tackle. I thought he was a serviceable enough right tackle that they could have kept him there, kept Fuaga at left tackle had they chosen to go a different spot in the draft. They didn't, which kind of told you, me, and Brendan, who were doing our draft show at the time, are like, okay, we're pretty sure that Penning is going to at least be given a shot at guard. And it makes sense on paper. I know, I'm poke fun at you Madden basement Madden players, saying, you can't just put a name in a different position, and just because they're a star name, they're going to automatically be good. But Trevor Penning, this might work, because the biggest problem that Penning has had has been agility in space and dealing with athletic defenders. Well, you have to deal with a whole lot less of both of those if you are at an inside spot. You still have to be agile, but you're not having to deal with those 4.4 speed edge rushers on the end, and you're not having to deal. You don't have to have the ballerina feet in both directions as often. So it makes sense that they're going to try Penning out there. I still expect some different looks. I wouldn't be surprised to see Banks get some looks at guard. To see Penning back at right tackle, Fuaga back at left tackle. They're going to mix and match, but I definitely believe that the Saints hope that this is the combination. And again, on paper, you have if that works out to be the case, you have 5 number 1 draft choices across your offensive line. Yeah, and I do believe at the end of the day that Banks and Fuaga are going to be your tackles. So the only way that this doesn't work out is if Penning flames out at guard and they have to fall back on Raduns or Clapp or whomever else. But it's pretty clear by the fact that they didn't draft a guard and they didn't sign another one other than Raduns. By drafting Banks, Kellen Moore believes that Trevor Penning will probably be a guard. And I mean, hell, it worked out. And I know you have a couple examples too. The example I have kept giving all week has been, it worked out pretty well for Andrus Peat, who was awful at right tackle, serviceable at left tackle, finally found a home at guard, a 3-time Pro Bowler at guard when the Saints moved him back inside. If the Saints can get that kind of play out of Trevor Penning, then that is a massive boost to the offensive line.
Yeah, my biggest fear about him being a guard is the dude is 6'7". When you have a quarterback who is 6 foot like Spencer Rattler, who is 6 foot on his tippy toes like Drew Brees, that's really tough.
It is
to look over the middle and make those plays over the middle. But if you have a 6'5", 6'4", 6'5" quarterback like you have in Tyler Shough, now suddenly you have bigger passing windows. You can do more things with big guys inside. And that's the thing about, making Penning work a la, the example I always come up with is Jim Dombrowski. Drafted as a left tackle, played left tackle, was not very good at that. Could do right tackle in a pinch, but Stan Brock was a better right tackle. They moved him inside the left guard, and he was a very, very good player at left guard. Got a lot of fights, but he was still a good player. They didn't make the playoff game because in 1988, because when they were playing the Washington Redskins, Dexter Manley got so frustrated with fighting with Dombrowski, spit in his face, and Dombrowski punched him for it. And what happens? The official always sees the second act. He never sees the first one. So when he punched him, Saints got penalized 15 yards for unsportsmanlike conduct. Just on the very edge of Morton Anderson's range, he misses that field goal that would have put him up by 10. The Redskins go right down the field, score a touchdown, and the Saints can't do anything, and the Redskins take the lead when they get their field goal, and the Saints just run out of time. They end up kicking a long field goal again to try and tie and force overtime, and Anderson was short because it was a grass field. And they used to say that Morton couldn't kick as well on a grass field. I think Morton took that to heart. He really got a lot better on a grass field, but 87 against the 49ers, when he beat the 49ers, that ball just barely made it across that goal post. So there was some truth to that back then. So my take on this is I think they're trying to find some place to put Penning. Coach Moore did say that last year the Eagles moved Mekhi Becton inside, making Becton a guard, and it worked well. So he feels like you can do that with Penning, and that's where I was going with this hemisphere. So it was Mekhi Becton, somebody actually I wanted the Saints to sign this year because it worked out so well as a guard.
Yes.
Because he really struggles to tackle with the Jets. So if they could do that with Penning, again, his height, his bend really concerned me. But if he can do that, I think you fixed a lot of the problems on the offensive line, because what's Penning's strength? Power. He loves to run block. What do you deal with as a guard inside? Power. You're dealing with power guys, not speed guys. You're dealing with power guys. So if you can run if Penning works out, between Penning and McCoy, those holes are going to be pretty big where you can get Neal, Kamara. I can't believe I'm going to say it, but Miller, if he can play.
Miller for a quarter.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to get those inside runs open up. And that's huge. That's what you need. That's what makes the quarterback's job easier. That's what protects your defense because you're controlling the clock, running the football. All the things we just said about the problems with Jim Moore's teams is the problem that Kellen Moore has right now. You've got to be able to run the football. If you can't run the football, that's going to be a problem. That's going to hurt your offense all year long. I think they've got the talent. I think they have an offensive line that, if it can stay healthy and together, will be able to run the football successfully enough that the passing game, you don't have to throw the ball 40 times to win a football game. You can throw it 20 times. To me, that's when Derek Carr was at his best. He was throwing the ball about 20 times. He was uncorking a deep ball about 6 times a game, and it was hitting. That's when you look at those first 2 games last year. That's when the Saints looked great.
Yeah.
But when they couldn't run the football anymore, when the injuries started piling up and Derek Carr had to throw the ball a lot and they were blitzing the hell out of him, that's where it all fell apart. So, I mean, that's the key thing. All right. So the other thing I wanted to talk about on the OTAs is a lot of people making a big deal about Spencer Rattler going 8 for 8, and Tyler Shough went 7 of 8. So it's not like that was a huge deal, but they're like, oh, Rattler's locked in. I know, I can see your face already. Real,
Jordy,
your take, but mine is, that's where the title of this thing comes from, this episode, Joe Walsh theme song, A Life of Illusion. It's 7-on-7, guys. They can't rush the passer. I mean, you're really reaching to think that you're going to make something out of this. I'm sorry. I just can't. I can't.
Yeah. And that's why I refuse. I mean, my networks, Saints Wire, and if anybody else other than me still wrote for Athlon Sports, I'm sure they would have wrote about it too. But I saw other people, other Saints media people write about it too. Spencer Rattler looks so much more comfortable than Tyler Shough. No shit. He should. This is the first time Tyler Shough has literally put on a New Orleans Saints football helmet. If Spencer Rattler isn't more comfortable than Shough on the very first OTA practice, then Spencer Rattler needs to start asking for drive-through orders in the McDonald's as his next profession. So is there going to be a competition between Rattler and Shough? Yeah. Is Shough going to win it? Is Rattler going to win it? I mean, it's way too early to tell. I have my thoughts that Shough should be the early favorite because, again, I've said it before. That's the guy that Kellen Moore handpicked, drafted himself. But Rattler's going to be given his chance, and you expect Spencer Rattler to look a lot more comfortable early. You expect Spencer Rattler to look much more comfortable than he did last year. When he was playing with backup JV players, because of all the injuries. But to anoint Rattler the starter, or to say the Saints have a quarterback controversy because of Spencer Rattler went 8 for 8 and 7-on-7s and OTAs. Give me a break. Look, I know you're reaching for stories this time of year. We all are. To my fellow media members, there's more to write about than the hyperbole of this kind of thing. This team has a rich past, plenty of former players to talk about, to write about, plenty of current players who are maybe on the cusp of a breakout season or need a big camp to make or break their job. There's other things to do other than make up stories like Spencer Rattler is a budding All-Pro because he went 8 for 8 in an OTA practice. I'm not going to write about stuff like that because I don't think it's news.
And yeah, I am pulling with Hollis Shough, but I would be saying this even if this was Shough that had went 8 for 8.
Yes.
You can't get excited about guys playing shorts and shells. It's basically 7-on-7 out there. Yeah, it's great. You want to talk about something football related, something positive, Saints news. You want to be optimistic. And I get all that, and that's good. That's important. But you've got to remember there's no contacts, no pass rushing, defensive backs. It's all install. They're learning the system. They're learning the offense. They're learning the new defense. So if he's hitting people 7-on-7, it's because in like a 7-on-7 drill, it's because the practice is designed to go that way.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to see what this kid is doing. How is he understanding what we just taught you in the classroom? If we taught you, okay, we're running a sail route. In this play, I want you to go shallow to deep. Make your decisions accordingly. And he's hitting the shallow guy. Yeah, it's a great completion, but is that what they wanted him to do in this practice drill? I don't know. We don't know because we're not in the classroom in this, what they just taught. But so I can't make a big deal out of that right now because it's all install. It's learning. I'm glad Tyler Shough's out there because we talked about last week. He hadn't signed his contract yet. He is out there because he signed a waiver, and he's basically playing for free with the condition that if I get hurt, I'm not holding the Saints responsible. That's a hell of a gamble.
Yeah.
But it shows he wants to be part of the team. He knows this is important. I need to learn this stuff because I'm not going to be able to learn it in training camp. I have to have an understanding of, I can look at the playbook all day long, but I actually have to go through the motions of learning this offense just so when it comes time for me to show up in end of July, I know what the hell I'm doing. I'm not far behind. I mean, especially now that Jake Haener got hurt, and he probably won't throw again until training camp. So he doesn't get those reps. And it was going to be hard for him to get the reps to begin with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not going to read into, look, we're already, jockeying at the, who's going. This is a practice run. This isn't the Kentucky Derby. This is a practice run, You just can't read that much into it.
A friend, I was at we were at a picnic on Sunday, and I happened to have a volleyball in my trunk. And a friend of mine, 14-year-old daughter, who played her first year of middle school volleyball last year. She saw that, she perked up, and she said, "Is that a volleyball?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Do you play?" And I kind of chuckled. I'm like, "Yeah, you could say that a little bit." And without giving her my whole resume, I gave her the Cliff Notes version, and she's like, "Will you show me a couple things?" I'm like, "Yeah." So we're playing around in the backyard, and she got some nice natural ability, by the way. But yeah, I taught her a couple things with her passing footwork, elbow and hand positioning on the sets, has a nice natural arm swing. But I'm not ready to sign her up for my pro-am co-ed volleyball team. There was no net out there. There was no competition out there. That's the exact kind of thing that we're talking about, folks. What Alan just said about 7-on-7s and just install the basic game plan, basic terminology. These are the routes that our passing game is going to be built around, the fundamental routes. And chemistry with your receivers. That's all what this is. That's the only thing that this was.
The verbiage, just learning the verbiage, because he's got to call this long play. And I'm guessing it's a long play call. Sean Payton was famous for long play calls.
Yeah.
But he's got to call this out. And, Drew was on, I think it was Kevin Colbert, one of those clowns on late night, but he was breaking it down. How the play call works. He said you only listen to part of it. This part's the offensive line here, and then you just tune the rest out. The receivers hear, what they have to do. The backs hear what they have to do. They hear the formation. And then he said, and the trick is there's going to be a kill. So if they get up there to the line, he sees that this defense is the right defense to counter the play call he just made. I'm going to say kill, and we're going to this play. So you have to listen again, so it's up to Drew to remember all that verbiage, which of course he did. He knew exactly what it was. So he would say kill, and then he'd change what the back protection is and what the receivers are going to do. And that was the difference in the kill play, So it's a great little video if you can find it on YouTube. I really enjoy it because he after he breaks the whole thing down, he says, so I get up to the line and screams. I'm going, it's XY shadow nasty, he just runs the whole thing up and kill, and then he runs the rest of the play, the next play. And it's just like, it's common sense. Don't you hear it? It's great. But that's, and John Gruden, when John Gruden was coaching, and Sean Payton too, would be up there saying, you got to speak with authority. You have to speak with confidence. You have to tell them the whole thing. And I want to hear it clearly. I want to hear it because that way the linemen all hear, they understand. It's that kind of stuff to me. I mean, that's what these OTAs teach you. That's what these OTAs are about, is you learn all those little things. So you're coming out the huddle in 12 seconds. You're coming out the huddle in 10 seconds. You're to the line and set with another 15, 20 seconds on the play clock. So you can look over the defense. If you got to change the protection, if you got to change the play, you can do all that. You're not going up to the line with 5 seconds left. And now you're panicking. You can't have that, I don't know, Hemisphere. I still feel like there's a vet they're going to bring in just because there's going to be a guy that they need for him to talk to on the sidelines. I know the coaches are doing all those things too, but sometimes you want a guy looking at the play at the tablet with you, Microsoft tablet. I'm sorry, I almost said iPad. That's not what they have. But looking at that too, going, you see that, and it's a teammate. I know coaches do it too, but sometimes the coaches get caught up in everything else that's going on around, especially head coaches, offensive coordinators. They're looking at everything else. You kind of want to have a guy sitting there next to you pointing things out, So, doing good, Donald. Doing good. So the last thing, I guess, is we talked about Kelvin Banks probably starting week 1. I'm going to ask you, Bob, because this is kind of a trick question. Offensive linemen that the Saints have drafted, they drafted a lot of them, but offensive linemen who had that outstanding rookie season where you're like, bam, this guy is going to be great. I mean, one's obvious because he's in the Hall of Fame, but some of Willie Roaf, and he started out on the right side, then he moved to the left. But can you think of some offensive tackles or offensive guards that the Saints have drafted, not signed as free agent, but drafted, and really in their rookie season, you could see these were going to be good players?
Ryan Ramczyk. And I will even contend that Ryan Ramczyk, in my opinion, had a better rookie year than Willie Roaf did. Ryan Ramczyk was just the man from the start. Now, his first game was a start at left tackle. Because Teron Armstead was hurt. Zach Strief was on the right side. Armstead came back just as Strief got hurt. And then, Ramczyk, I don't remember if it was week 2 or week 3 of the 17th season, but it was very early in the year where Ramczyk had to move over to replace Strief. And then after that, it was history. Ramczyk made the all rookie team. Should have made the Pro Bowl that year. Hell, he should have made the Pro Bowl or All Pro every year from 17 through 21. But that's another story. So I mean, Kyle Turley had a really nice rookie year. Jari Evans did too. So respect to all those guys. But to me, Ryan Ramczyk and Willie Roaf in that order for me topped the list as far as Saints rookie offensive linemen that were great right out of the gate.
Well, you remember when the Saints played the Houston Texans and J.J. Watt just abused Zach Strief and was screaming at the Saints, "You need a new right tackle. You need a new right tackle." Well, don't you know, we go and play the Texans. I think it was 18, but it might have been 17. But Ryan Ramczyk went up against J.J. Watt. And J.J. Watt zeroed him out. Ramczyk zeroed out J.J. Watt. He didn't make a play. He didn't make a stat. I mean, that is Art Shell to what's his name?
Jim Marshall.
Jim Marshall in Super Bowl 11. That's what Art Shell did to Jim Marshall in Super Bowl 11. No stats. It was like you were playing with 10 guys. Because Jim Marshall did nothing that day. He couldn't. And I think that's what kind of told J.J. Watt, I might have to retire soon because I cannot get past this guy. Rookie season, it's really tough because a lot of Saints rookies great offensive linemen didn't start as rookies. They came on later, like Teron Armstead came. I think we were talking about this off the air. I think he started like week 10 in his second year. I think it was 2014 when Sean Payton said, "I'd seen enough" with Charles Brown and put Armstead in there. So he didn't do anything his rookie year. Stan Brock did not play that much in the 1980 season. He really started in 1981. Carl Nix, although he wasn't a tackle, he was drafted as a tackle and he was kicked over to guard. Carl Nix, I would probably put up there with Jari Evans as far as best ever guards for the Saints. I think Carl Nix took over from Wally Williams in 2008 because Wally Williams served his suspension for the Star Caps incident. You remember Star Caps? That was the dietary thing that Deuce McAllister, I think Will Smith, and Wally Williams all took this diuretic to make weight. It helped you lose fluid. And it flagged the drug test. But this product had been approved and was on the approved list for the league, and that was the contention that that Will Smith and Deuce McAllister had about it. Was that, look, this was legal. You guys said we could take this, and they're like, no, you're responsible for whatever you put in your body.
Right.
And it puts the onus on the guy because it's like, I wouldn't have taken this if you didn't approve this. But anyway, yeah. So Carl Nix took his job as a starter because Williams didn't go through the appeal process. He's like, I'll just serve my suspension for 6 games, whatever, and I'll come back. Well, yeah, he came back, but you need your job back. We got Carl Nix in there now, and Carl Nix was a definite upgrade. So, I mean, to me, I really like what Carl Nix did. You mentioned Kyle Turley. Trying to think of some others.
McCoy and Talise Fuaga both had really good rookie years.
Yeah, Fuaga was somebody I was going to mention.
Yeah, I mean, Fuaga, he just played for a bad team, so just kind of got swept under the rug.
But he shut down. Who was the big pass rusher last year? He shut down.
Oh God!
Was the Cleveland Browns guy? They just paid him a ton of money.
Myles Garrett
had 0 stats that game. So yeah, I mean, one of the other reasons why I wasn't that anxious to move him back to the right side, I'm like, did a pretty damn good job on the left side.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, those kind of guys. One guy I was going to mention was Kevin Haverdink. That's a name that a lot of you guys probably don't remember. He was a rookie for the Saints. a real bizarre incident happened on the sideline that ended up ending his career. He had some back trouble. He was the left tackle for the Saints. Had some back trouble, and I don't remember what game it is. I think it's the '88 season. He's stretching on the sidelines, and he's sitting on the ground facing the bench. So his back is to the field, which you should never do, but he was doing it. And a play came in behind him, and the guy ran into him and just helmet right in the lower back, and he ended up going off on a cart back to the locker room. I could do a whole show just on bizarre injuries that happen to Saints players. Guys like Adrian McPherson, who got run over by the mascot in the golf cart for Tennessee. I mean, that kind of stuff. I could talk about all these guys who got these bizarre injuries, that had nothing to do with the game itself. Shit that happened to him on the sideline. People getting caught up in the cable when the coach yanks the cable and he trips a player, Jimmy Graham taking out Sean Payton on the sideline in 2011, breaking his leg, that kind of stuff. So anyway, Havertink just never was the same, because if you get a back injury as an offensive lineman, you're done. You're done. But he had a promising career, and Richard Cooper ended up taking over for him. Then they flipped Brock and Cooper. Cooper went to the right side. Brock went to the left side. And that was the way it was going to be until Brock got ragdolled by Reggie White in the playoff game in '92. And that happened right in front of me. Oh, my God. And Reggie White did that to a lot of people. It's not just Stan Brock. But that hump move, I mean, he got him so good. He threw Stan Brock into Bobby Hebert in the end zone and tackled them both. There's, when you're talking about old school, that stuff you just don't see anymore. Guys just don't do that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Lawrence Taylor, taking the Buffalo Bills offensive lineman and sacking the quarterback with the offensive lineman. I think Cam Jordan was the last one I've seen somebody do that against when he was playing against Detroit in 2017, where he just threw the guy right into the quarterback. He's now with the Rams. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but the quarterback for the Lions back then, Matt Stafford. Yeah. You have the Bayou Blitz coming on this week?
I think so.
I know he had his second honeymoon last week.
And for those of you that know him and follow us, that Brendan Boylan doesn't flex a lot of things out on social media, either Twitter or Facebook. So he retweeted something I did this past weekend, so I know he's still alive, but I haven't heard from him. And usually if we have to move a show from Wednesday, I would have heard from him by Tuesday afternoon. So unless you see a last minute announcement from us, plan on Bayou Blitz tomorrow evening at our usual time, 8 p.m. Central. If something changes, we will post on our Bayou Blitz pages as well as our own social medias, both Twitter and Facebook. So, keep an eye out. But as far as I know, we're planning on going.
One last thing, and then I'm going to let you go for the night, Bob. But did you happen to see what the Falcons did? They posted the Falcons social media thing. They posted, "We coming," and they got two players. Their numbers are 3 and 28. I said, if I'm Arthur Blank, I'm firing the social guy, because you don't put those two numbers together in the Falcons anymore. Mm-hmm. And if I'm Gail Benson, I'm cutting somebody a check over there at the Falcons, because that is Trojan horse level trolling. That you got guys over there who are going to troll their own team with 28-3. It's not even star players. I couldn't understand why they picked 28-3.
I know.
Put Penix up there. Put Kyle Pitts as a bust, but put him in there. Drake London. Bijan Robinson, anybody. Why did you pick 28-3? I don't get it.
Thank God, no matter how bad the Saints are or could be, they will never falcon the way the Falcons falcon.
Oh, my God.
Ever.
And they're talking shit about us, too, on social media. It's like, then they put this clip of Penix throwing these passes that are, one's behind the receiver, one's way up high. It's like, are you trying to excite your fans? Because you're not doing a very good job. I mean, it's just, get Wendy's in charge of your social media, something,
Or their defensive linemen, and I use that term loosely, Duke Okoro, ragging on Penning, Penning's moved to guard. Thank God, we're going to eat. Meanwhile, Duke, you played in 4 games, had 1 tackle and 0 quarterback pressures as a rookie. So keep yapping, son.
Yeah, and Penning shut your ass down at right tackle. So you're going to talk shit about that guy? Oh, I know. They're just so stupid. They are so. That's why I'm glad they're our rival, because they're so freaking stupid.
Yeah.
And their fans know it. Not the delusional fans. I mean, they got the delusional ones who are just going to talk shit no matter what. But the Falcoholic and people like that are like, no, we know we suck. We know we're going to find a way to lose. We're going to be optimistic and stuff, but it's like a car accident waiting to happen. We know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So, and that's why when the Falcons lose, I love going to Falcons social media because it is so entertaining. It sounds just like some of our Saints fans. It really does. You just change the names of the players and the teams. But but I have to give them the Gallows humor is really top notch. So I'm glad you're our rivals. The Panthers, and that other team in there, I think they're called the Bucks. They're not our rivals. They're just Atlanta's our rival because we share our misery. We both have lived it. The old heads like you and I, and the old Falcon fans, we know.
Yep.
So it's fun. It really is. These kids, they're just not creative enough. All right. Bob, and all you guys, thanks for joining us tonight. I know it's a dead time, but that's actually a good thing because nobody got arrested. They're still tracking down the 10 escapees from Orleans Parish Prison. They got 2 left. But, we have rolling blackouts. It's for third-class city, I'm telling you. Third world over here, man. But that's a good thing that there's nothing bad happening with the Saints right now. Because as long as that happens, that means we're having a good offseason. I don't need any more drama. I don't need somebody getting arrested. I don't need somebody shooting themselves. I don't need anything like that. I just need a nice, quiet OTAs. We'll have the mini camp, and then we'll see you in July. Let's leave it at that. And no hazing incidents. Check to see if the Bayou Blitz goes on. It'll be a surprise for Bob, just like it'll be a surprise to the rest of us. But I'm sure, Bob, it's going to be, if they do have it, it'll be a lot like tonight, a lot of the same kind of things. So in the meantime, you guys have a good week, and we'll see you next time on Another Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.